Let's take a look now at the impact of the inclement weather conditions around the country. The Nelson Mandela Bay is bracing for more heavy rains. That's while the area still reels from recent floods. Over 1,000 people had to be evacuated from their homes. And to give us an update, we have eNCA's Ronald Masinda. He joins us on the line. Thank you so much, Ronald, for your time. We know that this has been happening for at least over a week, where 1,000 people had to be evacuated and accommodated in relief centres. What is the latest there?
Good morning from a chilly Gqeberha and also a windy one, and there's no reason why a lot of people would say that this city should not be referred to as the windy city. But tonight, of course, there's anticipation of more rains that could also lead to flooding as well as on Thursday. But disaster management teams here in Gqeberha are standing by. We do know that later this morning at around 9 o'clock, the Cooperative Governance and Traditional Affairs MEC, Zolile Williams, will be briefed by the Nelson Mandela Bay municipality. But there's also other activities taking place. But before we mention them, Zolile Williams will be briefed here by the Nelson Mandela Bay Disaster Management. And you will be taken on an oversight tour to the affected areas such as New Brighton, KwaZulu, Mission Vale, Kleinskloer, as well as Motherwell. Karega is also one of the areas where they'll look into. And part of today's visit will also look into ways of trying to ensure that such devastating floods don't take place, because what we saw Saturday and Sunday were people were left stranded. Over 1,200 people were displaced, but we do understand that at least half of that sum has since returned to their places of residence. But what we also know is that there will be announcements made by provincial government as to how much will they do for the Nelson Mandela Bay region, as well as other affected areas such as Port St. John's in the Eastern Cape. We are also expecting Social Development MEC Bukiwe Fanta to also visit Nelson Mandela Bay this morning to assess some of the damages that took place.
And Ronald, we understand that some residents were, at least they didn't want to be evacuated. They were reluctant because of fear of losing their possessions. Out of the 1,000 that ultimately were evacuated and then placed in relief centres, there are now only 100 remaining that in the main, the most have now been resettled into their homes. Is there any confirmation in terms of the assistance and aid to residents in Gqeberha or the Eastern Cape that had been affected by the floods?
So the latest I received this morning was information from the Gift of the Givers. They are saying that they are at the moment looking after at least 200 residents who were displaced during the floods. But what we also know is that social development as well as other stakeholders have been assisting residents who have also lost essential items such as their IDs. Children who were also affected by these floods have lost their school books. So they is some form of aid that they are receiving in terms of receiving books on time. But as we've been here since earlier this week, we also went around other areas such as looking at the condition of some of the schools, and what were the issues there was. There are schools that were still suffering from these floods, waterlogged schools, and what has been asked by these schools is that the Nelson Mandela Bay municipality must also look at ways of installing storm water drains, which are essential during heavy floods. And this is what we also understand is that the Nelson Mandela Bay municipality's disaster management team is also looking into ways of trying to mitigate these droughts, because they are expected to continue for at least another 2 days in terms of what we saw over the weekend with the floods.
All right, Ronald, thank you so much for that report. That's eNCA's Ronald Masinda giving us an update, reporting from Gqeberha as a result of the floods taking place over the past weekend. 1,000 residents had to be evacuated. We are told that 100 at least remain in relief centres.